And
All right, so this is Collab Lab. So this is your time. This is something that Brainy Pixel actually we used to do this a long time ago in physical form. Back when we had an office for about a year before COVID. Michael and I, we live in North Alabama, and God led us to get some office space. There's a great story about that. I'll tell sometime when y'all want to hear it. But we had an office for about a year, and at that time we had a bunch of interns at University of Alabama of Huntsville, which was right up the road. And so what we would do is we utilize the office for a couple things, and one of them was really just loving on our interns. Just kind of letting them know that they were important and appreciated and cared for. And so what we would do is on Thursdays we would have them over, and usually we'd cook a big like crock pot meal or something, or spaghetti, something homemade, right? And that's always a big draw for the college age students, right? Something homemade and delicious. So we would gather, we would pray, we would eat, and then the rest of the evening we would just chat about projects that they had going on, things they were passionate about, things they wanted to learn about. Sometimes they would ask for help on a project or critiques, and we called it Collab Lab because it was like a laboratory of collaboration. So we've decided to kind of crank that back up here on the Discord. So while I can't offer you any spaghetti or chicken and dumplings, I do wish I could. So yeah, Collab Lab is kind of whatever you all want to talk about. We had a topic that was suggested, but I'd love to hear from the gang that's here what they'd like to discuss. So.
I liked the look of the topic. I thought it was a really interesting thing to start talking about. The whole aspect of focusing on telling a strong story and allowing people to come to their own um, piece together their own conclusions on the matter. And
Mhm.
actually, I wanted to ask you about this because do you remember this was several collab labs back before you went on vacation temporarily? You talked about how you were going to go meet with Matt Rhodes.
The guy doing Dead Gods.
Yes.
Mhm.
Did that ever get
Yeah.
to pan out?
Yeah. I've met with Matt several times. He is a super. I mean, I've been following his work for a while, right? Back when he was doing Tellurion, or however you pronounce it. I don't even know how you pronounce it right. But if you guys get a chance, go check out Matt Rhodes on YouTube.
I
He's
got his
got.
book for Christmas.
There you go. So yeah. So he's a visual storyteller. He works primarily in the animation and art world, primarily as like a storyboarder or concept artist. But several years ago, he got this idea to kind of do a visual story and just create the images and create them in such a way where he didn't need any words to kind of figure out what was going on with the story. Later on, he added words as well, and has created this great book. And if you'll hold it up,
Yeah.
Stephen Tyler Clark, that'd be great. So it's a beautiful work, and so now he's doing one in addition to other things he's got going on that's set in the antediluvian world, so the period in between the fall and the flood, right? And he's really kind of cranking up, and this is a perfect segue into what we're talking about, this topic, right? Because he's really cranking up all the craziness, right? So the Nephilim, fallen angels, dinosaurs, a fallen creation, megafauna, megaflora. He's kind of cranking all that, like what kind of technology would have existed in this period of hundreds of years where mankind was pretty much at the top of their game, like genetically, like biologically, mentally, right? Adam and Eve obviously were made perfect, right? And then after the fall is when the genetic code began to break down. So people would have been stronger, faster, smarter, more able, more capable, and they live for hundreds of years. So imagine being able to master multiple different skills, to supreme expertise levels. What kind of world would that create? And so he's really kind of diving into that whole hog and doing an amazing job. And that's one of the I have some stories that I'm crafting in that same space as well. So anyway, there might be some collab in the future there, Steven Tyler Clark. There might be some options for some collaboration, but he's kind of holding things closely to the vest because he understands that the more cooks you get in the kitchen, oftentimes you know the more odd the soup is. So
The reason why I wanted to bring it up that's in particularly because I got the book for Christmas and I started thumbing through it, and I'd like online, I'd read through the story several times, and by read, I mean there's no words, and
Right.
it's designed intentionally as a wordless story. But what I didn't expect when I got the book was just how much, because he puts in little notes and stuff, and he talks about how much of the Christian ideology and theology he puts into it. Like the whole story is about them looking for a sword. But in the book, he elaborates on that outside of the story and says it's the sword of truth. And it says without truth, humanity falls into an animalistic state. And so he talks about how all of his character designs show like humans living as sort of animals in this world that's fallen, and they're waiting for truth to be brought back to them so they could be elevated back up to where they're supposed to be. And it's amazing that there's just so many layers of storytelling in that,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be like as like unpalatably in your face, you know.
Yeah, he's not pandering, right? There's not a salvation moment, there's not a Jesus character, it's not, you know, he's just telling an amazing story with a ton of symbolism and allegory layered into it, right? And he's doing the same thing with Dead Gods, right?
Right.
I encourage you guys. He's basically each week he drops a video on like his pre-production process, and he talks through it, and it's really well done. And again, I think personally, I mean, this is one of the things we founded Brainy under, is that trying to create this kind of content, right? Is that we saw there was this huge gap in between what the secular world is doing and what the Christian entertainment world is doing, and it's leaving a bunch of people wandering, right, and just not satisfied. Um, when you focus your stories just on what I say a lot on podcasts and things of that nature when I get the opportunity, is that what the Christian market does really wrong is they will sacrifice the story on the altar of the message, right? And we all understand that ultimately the message that we got to get out there is the gospel, right? But what Christianity does is they sacrifice all the elements of the story, to the point where the message is the only point, right? And I think there's a disservice there. I think that what we have to do as storytellers is exactly what the world used to do, and that they had a message. Every storyteller has a message, something they're trying to get across your brain, but they would subtly weave it in. Ironically, what we're seeing now in the secular world is they're doing the same thing the Christians have been doing for the last several decades, where they've got an agenda that they're also trying to put right out in your face, and so they're now doing the same thing the Christian industry is doing. So I'm hoping that we can kind of subvert what's going on out there as creators, and create these sublime and subtle stories that are beautiful, that are well told, that don't necessarily have to have a salvation moment, or even necessarily focus on biblical salvation, but maybe it's a salvation of a different sort, and then it points to, right, the Christian message. But that's just kind of my opinion. I'll let some other folks talk.
Yeah, it's like Christian propaganda.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has to be taken down the Roman road of salvation, or the product isn't
Christian.
worthy. Right.
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly. That is that's a burden that I believe that God put on my heart as well. Kind of through my own interests, I when I started to get more serious about living for God, I didn't like how all of the Christian entertainment was so corny. Um, and it feels good to the more I get to know more Christians and like animation and entertainment in general, that there's a growing sentiment of that. It's like, hey, we we got to step it up with something that's reaching the audience. I think one something that's probably a byproduct of just like the day we live in is that kids younger and younger are consuming more and more mature themed stuff. It's been happening forever. Even when I was a kid, You know, things like, you know, Grand Theft Auto has been in the news because like young kids were playing this like super violent game. Um, but that was like, you know, decades ago. We're way past that, and now like I was telling somebody before that like it feels like there's either like preschool entertainment and then entertainment for everyone else. There is no like kid entertainment, not anymore.
Right.
Not for the world. Maybe in like the Christian lifestyle, we've got like kind of a segmented off thing, but I work with kids at school sometimes, and I just kind of hear what they've been watching, what they're tuning into, just to kind of get a vibe check of, you know, what the state of the world is like. And it's, you know, all of the adult memes that they shouldn't be understanding or laughing at, or things that go viral on TikTok, it's hitting the kids, you know.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's a perfect time for it. Reminded me of one of the projects that and edit this out if you can't talk about it. But I think Brandon, you wanted to pitch before was like a kind of like Gendy Tartakovsky's like Primal, but like Bible stories, like in that kind of raw primal way. Um, I think the way that the world is now, it's like the world is ready for something like that, like an unfiltered story of Genesis, right? I think kids should. I don't think people should be protected from what the Bible says, and maybe there should be some parental discretion, like how young your kid should watch this. But in general, I think that like there, the Bible deserves to have its story told in a fresh, entertaining medium that people are consuming now. Because sadly, nobody's reading books anymore. The general public isn't reading. I think when people are, you know, they're saved and they, you know, they love God and they want to read more about the Bible. Yeah, but reaching the general public, you're gonna need flashy art, entertainment. You need the good storytelling. You need the compelling characters, and the Bible has all that. It's I think the world is ready for to see it in a fresh light. Not reinventing the Bible, just maybe changing the delivery a little bit. Sorry, guys, I'm eating.
Agreed. I would say there's been a people have termed this the vibe shift ever since I think the election, I guess. Um,
Mm.
Ever since that's changed, there's been a kind of a dam broken where a lot of people are thinking it's fine to actually publicly say stuff like the Bible is right, for example, or say actually engage in that kind of iconography using things that are reminiscent of Renaissance paintings and the stuff that would have been canceled or maligned as, you know, not savory for various reasons. These things are now much more acceptable in the public now because there's a critical mass of public support for it. So the dam is broken on a lot of that. Like there's a whole slew of new projects being greenlit now that are
Yeah,
biblical subjects. Though are Christians making them? Not in all cases.
yeah.
And is
Which
it going to be
that's
like,
dangerous as well.
yeah, yeah. So that's going to be
There-
interesting. Yeah.
You're exactly right. There is, and you know, so Brainy and House Aducci, Nick and Jess, we've been partnered on several projects for several months. I guess we're probably going on a year in our partnership at this point. I don't even remember, but it's been a while. And so we've had these conversations because we're all very much, the three of us are very much on the same page when it comes to these sort of things. But there's been this, we've seen over the last 5 years, this very subtle shift, right? Going from when we first kind of stepped out into the arena where people were not really interested in spending really any money on anything other than preschool animation, right? All the way to the point where now at NRB, it was a palpable, it was like, you know, we were there in Dallas for 4 days, right? And there was a palpable thing in the air, right? People were excited about making content. And we had people approaching us that we didn't know or that we just met about, you know, hey, would you guys be interested in doing a feature? would that be something that you'd be able to do? I mean, we had multiple different people asking us these very high level questions, right? And yeah, I mean, whatever your politics are, and that's not anything necessarily this call is about, but there's been a big shift since November. Things that we've been waiting on for some, in some cases, years or multiple months, have been greenlit. And before we left Dallas, we hadn't even made it out of the city, right? So the convention ends on Thursday, and we get up on Friday, and my inbox is filling up with requests for quotes for work, right? So it is, something's going on. Praise God, and He is moving. He is moving His people. His people are interested in doing some really cool things, and Lord willing, we'll get to be a part of some of that. So, yeah.
I think some of it is the kind of two different classes of things. Like, this is what we've been looking at as far as how we divvy out our work or what we're interested in producing. So there's kind of ministry resources. So that, I mean, that could even be like the adaptation of the Bible, like Primal, the Gendy stuff and all of that. And it's amazing. But there's also like Nick mentioned, there's a lot of people who are trying to do Bible adaptations like that. Like, there's a lot of just a slew, like the David stuff and people, things from The Chosen and all that. And it's somewhere in between, right? It's directly biblical, or like from the Bible, not biblical, but from the Bible, and everything. And then there are stories that it's like what Christians have been trying to do, which is put media out there and just tell stories. Just tell stories. And I think it gets to the heart of, is the message first, I suppose, or how do you approach that? And something that I've been debating a lot lately is theme. Are you talking about a universal theme? So for us, we want to talk about Jesus, or we want to talk about this, or we want to talk about that, and the message becomes the theme, essentially, and it overrides everything, and it's not great. But how about we make a movie or a story, tell a story, not make a movie, tell a story about death. And then you have characters, that's a very universal theme. Everyone deals with death. So like, and then how the characters approach that, it then can speak to your belief systems and things like that. Like how they bounce that back and forth, how they react to it, how, all that kind of stuff. So being able to just understand storytelling and trying to do that through a Christian lens requires still telling stories like universal themes, getting to the heart of what we deal with as humans, but understanding that we deal with that very differently. We see it very differently. And if the world could see how differently we see it, they would be shocked. Like it would be this powerful story. But again, too often we're thinking, at least I do, I think really concretely and linearly, which is horrible as a writer. And to be able to kind of get back to the universal themes of things and go, okay, I really want to talk about this, or I really want to talk about that from the Bible or from my walk, or da 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 da. But really, how does that relate to the world? Like, how is this addressing something in their life, or how are they going to think about this? How would this turn into a conversation? And like I said, getting back to love, relationships, death, like some of the fear, getting back to some of those common themes, and then presenting and not being scared to debate. That's the other thing about storytelling, is to constantly push and pull it. And I think we're very scared to push and pull. Depending on how you grew up, or, however you were taught and everything else, how you've grown in your walk with the Lord, it can be very scary to ask questions, or you've been told not to ask questions. And I think storytelling is very much all about pushing and pulling and asking questions. And even though again, I'm a film person, so I may end my movie leaning one way, but people should be able to walk out of the theater and understand the other way, and have a conversation. They shouldn't just be walking out going, well, that was another Christian movie, ended on Jesus, like, you know, or something like that. It's sort of just like,
everybody was happy and Christmas was saved.
That's right, you know? Because we're in a Lifetime movie. So I'm glad you mentioned Christmas, because that's just Lifetime to me. But yeah, exactly. Like, can they walk out of the theater genuinely seeing something they've never seen before from a Christian perspective, from a Christian lens, but also kind of pushing back on that. I talked about it on a stream I did not too long ago, so Kat's heard this before, but like, I genuinely, at the end of Avengers Infinity War, kind of said, go you, Thanos. Like, he had done what he had planned to do, and he was happy, and it ended with this little happy face and whatever. And the entire theater is silent because they're just like horrified. And I'm just sitting there going, you look so happy. Like, I could walk out and see both.
The reason for that is that movie, Endgame, Thanos was the hero. Right? I mean, that movie was written, he was the main character, right? And so, yeah, he has to have that completion in his arc, where at the end of the movie, he's done his thing, and now he's satisfied, right? And he's ready to retire, right? So he is kind of the hero of that movie, and it makes you grapple with that question, and that's what we don't do very well. And something you mentioned, Jess, was that regardless of whether we're scared to ask questions or not, right? Because I think some of us here are and some of us are not. The problem is the industry is scared to ask questions, right? The industry is scared to create content that promotes any kind of question, because they want to hand you the answer.
Yes.
Right. But the problem is a lot of people, when they're searching for the truth, they need to go through that process of asking questions, right? You can't just hand them the answer. As a matter of fact, if you hand them the answer, they're going to reject it because they don't believe it's valid yet. They have to go through this process. That was my journey. You know, for those of you who've heard my testimony, I had to go through that process of understanding all the questions and get answers to all those before I could come to the realization. And so we as creators, whether it's animators or story makers or filmmakers or whatever part we have in the process, we've all got to be baking that into our thoughts, right? Is that, can we present this in a way where it causes people to ask questions? Because that's not a bad thing. I mean, look at Jesus, right? 9 times out of 10, every time he opens his mouth, it's in response to a what? A question. And then almost half of the time when he answers, what does he answer with? Another question. So, I mean, the dude's all about questions, right? So we can't avoid them, right? And I think, Jess, I think you're spot on. And one of my favorite examples of what you're talking about, and I've said this in a past, probably in a past Collab Lab or something, I don't remember where it was, is the movie Signs by M. Night Shyamalan, right? Oh, nice. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's an alien invasion movie, right? On its face. It's a movie about alien invasion. Mel Gibson is in it. It's really well done, very well written, very, very well acted. But it ain't about aliens, right? The theme is not aliens. The theme is the sovereignty of God. And what's amazing is you can watch that film if you haven't put it together yet, and it works. It works as an alien invasion. All the characters they feel fully formed. All their actions work. All their decisions feel satisfactory. It feels like a whole movie in and of itself until it clicks that you're like, oh, this is about God's sovereign design for this dude's life, right? And you go back and watch it, and it is everywhere. And God is never mentioned. Jesus's name is never spoken. The only thing is at the beginning of the movie, Mel Gibson is in his bedroom, and there's a cross, the place where a cross was on the wall, like where, you know, like the sun is kind of faded. And then at the end, he is putting his dog collar back on, and the cross is back on the wall. I mean, other than if you count, there's a cross in the door, right? It zooms in on the door, and there's a cross in the middle of the door. But that's the only thing. It's never spoken. It's not overt in any way. It's super subtle. I encourage you to go watch that film. But it is all over that film, and I love it. I love it for that reason. I think it's one of the greatest Christian movies that's been made in the last, 50 years. Because it does, for me, it does exactly what I want. right? It gives me a great ride, a super cool idea, a neat adventure, but it informs me about something that's important to me. Whether I hate it, whether I love it, it's something that impacts me, right? So that's kind of my model I'm writing.
I think it's interesting or important storytelling to give the audience credit
Yeah.
that they can take implications. Like even
Absolutely.
if you don't say it, lots of times, at least for me, the themes that stick with you most are the ones that I figured out.
Yeah.
Or like
Yeah.
they didn't just say. Like I
Respect
know
your
one
audience.
movie
They're smart.
that I really liked and I still like. It's called Late One Night. And it's a 30-minute Christian film. And part of it is a Christian movie. And it has a salvation message. But then like in it, it's also an allegory in it, which is very interesting. Like the main character is a terrible guy, and at the end of the movie, he's about to beat up this guy who did present him the gospel, and then the guy pays for his meal, and then the movie ends with him like about to thinking about if he's going to go beat up the other guy or not. It never says it's an allegory, and like at the very end, like you're watching, you're like, that was a weird place to end the movie, and then you realize, oh wait a minute, I'm the guy, Jesus paid my bill. What am I going to do about it? But it never says
Oh.
that. It takes a few minutes after you watch it to realize what just happened.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't pander to your audience and respect them. They're smart. I agree 100%, Corey. I can't stand those movies.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Whoops. I was gonna say, I think, kind of in the same vein as you were saying, Brandon, that I think I took a lot of inspiration, somewhat unknowingly, from Prince of Egypt. Um, that was a movie that, like, from the world standpoint, was like really successful, super respected, and God was all over it. But it wasn't because I would argue it wasn't because it was a bunch of Christians saying God's the best, God's the best, God's the best. We really got to see a really human journey. We see Moses have to leave his home, um, betray his people. Um, we see Moses go through this like roller coaster of like really human emotions, even when he's presented with like the all powerful, power of God. He's still doubting. He pulls out his hand from his cloak and it's like leprosy. Puts it back, it's gone, and he's still like, yeah. Well, wait a minute. We get a real slice of humanity with Moses and like how he acts, and and I think that well, for most unbelievers that I know, their perception of the Bible is it's a book full of good people setting good examples that we got to read and follow. And I'm like, no, no, no. The Bible shows us that the only good person is God. Like the Bible is full of people that messed up again and again and again, all kinds of things. And I think that the Bible is full of stories that we innately relate to because they're human like we are and they're messing up like we do. And it was just a good movie all around. We get to see the person that's antagonistic to God because he's got his own culture and like Moses' brother, and he's just like, listen, I've got my own responsibilities. I can't turn around and bow to your God. Like, I think that movie has so much that Christians in entertainment today can still learn from, and like the way that it was presented, without really like hiding God from the movie. And I don't think that's what was said earlier. I do think that we can be really subtle with presenting the gospel, but I think if you get too subtle, it ends up just being like a face-based thing that people can like take the movie's premise and like map it to their own pre-existing beliefs. They can say like, "Oh, the universe is always out for your good." It's like, no, 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 no. This is about God loving you. And that's the kind of story that I want to bring to the world. One that shows the public the goodness of God, but it doesn't shy away from our human experience and just people that have a good dare I say, like a healthy doubt of the gospel before they really come to Christ. A lot of films that and it's like plays that my own church does, and I feel like my major critique is that people accept the gospel too soon. Like they're a skeptic in scene
Sure.
one, and by like act three, they're like, "Oh yeah, I love Jesus now. It's all good."
Well, I mean,
But
what does that speak to, right? This attitude, because it is what you're talking about is prevalent in the industry, right? In that if we create something that's going to cast any doubt in anyone's mind, then oh my goodness, they're not going to get saved, right? Well, what's that? What is that? What's the underlying motivation there, right? It's doubt. And who are they doubting?
yeah,
They're doubting God,
mm,
right? They're doubting his
right,
sovereignty, they're doubting his plan, and they're doubting that he can use anything to bring someone to himself, right? So, I mean, it doesn't have to be,
yeah,
like Jeff said, a Romans Road presentation of the gospel. There are sometimes you need that, but there are sometimes you don't, right? There are sometimes when that is the
right,
last thing you need. So they're doubting that God can do what God needs to do, right? So interestingly, Prince of Egypt was an abject failure in the box office, right?
What?
If you go
yeah.
look it up, it bombed in the box office. I think it didn't make its P&A money back, right?
That's my favorite
Oh no, I didn't
But
think it did.
There's
but but
there's a
it
reason
did
why they went with that
amazing.
animation style.
It did amazing in the post box office realm of at
Yeah,
that
I
point
think
home
so.
video, and I'm sure now
Right.
streaming and things of that nature. It did amazing there, and I think it made like triple the amount of its production, right? But there's also this thing we have to bear in mind is that some people will never, just like they'll never walk into a church, they'll never walk into a Christian movie, right? So if we're not making something that appeals to them, like, oh, I don't know, a zombie movie, right? That is really all about redemption and rebirth, death to life, right? That's a movie in
Have
Brandon's head.
I was about to say, have you been reading my inbox? What's going on? I'm producing
Well,
that with my writing partner. What are you doing?
well, Jess, you know that you and I are linked at a brainstem kind of way. I mean,
We
we have
really are.
since we met. So you're like the female version of me, honestly.
So you're gonna co-produce Recently Receased then? That's what you're telling me?
Well, send me the script. Let's go. So But anyway, the point here is that some people would never walk into Prince of Egypt, right? And I think that's what we saw in the box office is that people are like, oh no, that's a Christian movie. I can't go watch that. I'm with my friends, right? Or I don't
Yeah,
want
yeah.
people in my neighborhood to know that I'm walking into that theater to see that movie, because there's a stigma.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we've got
Right,
to
right,
be
right.
as wily as serpents and as gentle as doves, and we got to make things that appeal to people
Sure.
where they are, right?
Mm,
But still infuse that story with the right balance of the gospel, right? Whatever that story
absolutely.
needs, whatever redemption
For
story
sure.
that needs. So,
One
Jess,
more
if you
thing, I
haven't
think.
yet,
go ahead, Stephen.
I was going to say, if you haven't yet, Jess, you should do a podcast on the pitfalls of a happy ending.
The pitfalls of a happy ending. I could do that. Sure. Yeah. I do a writing podcast or podcast. I keep calling it a podcast. A writing stream. Writer of Wrongs. So yeah, that's a great topic for me to explore.
Back to you, Jamal. Stephen stepped on you. Go ahead.
One thing I'm gonna I think we as Christians should move in the direction of Christian creatives. I think we should start creating proof of concept videos or like animated shorts maybe. Something that's relatively low cost but a good way to pitch it to sorry, pitch it to people that can fund the project that kind of just bypasses all the intellectual, because if they can just see it in action, it might reach somewhere that like a verbal pitch can't.
You want to tell him, or do I need to tell him, Jess?
Oh,
Show me
what's
the
going on?
money.
So,
Yeah, it's gonna cost
sadly,
something. Yeah, for
so,
sure.
so sadly, Jamal, the point we are in the industry, and I think this is probably true with the secular as well as the Christian, is an idea is no longer any good, right? An idea and a treatment is no longer any good. An idea and a treatment and a pitch is no longer any good. You now have to come with an idea, a treatment, a pitch, probably a script, and a pilot. So you basically have to make the first episode of whatever you're going to make, or the first, 10 minutes of it.
So basically, you're spot on with
I
what you're
see.
saying. You're not like
Oh,
Yeah,
you're spot
you
on.
guys have
It's
already okay. That was just an idea
money
in my
and
head, but
months
you
of
guys have already
time.
experienced how true this is.
yeah, you're 100% correct, Jamal. That's
Oh,
kind of the
darn it.
minimum you have to have now to get into the door, right?
Oh,
Which is
boo.
really tough because it puts the onus
I
on the
would-
creator or the producer to kind of go, okay, yeah, like Nick said, we've got now several months of work that we're going to go do, and I hope pizza's
Yeah.
good for everybody because that's all we got, right? So
You
I
know,
was
people
hoping that
used
was the
to.
idea of
cobble
like,
together your
here's how we can
cameras
get
and
ahead
your
of the
friends.
curve. But if
Yeah.
that's what's already expected, then oops.
Well, people were making fun of Kickstarter projects for this for like, I don't know, like 6, 7, 8 years ago. I know in 2016, Wingfeather Saga was kickstarted as like just the pilot, which
Yeah.
a lot of people were sort of baffled as to why were they. Wait, so you're getting us to pay for you to animate and produce like 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes of what is a pilot, not an actual show, so that you can pitch it to someone else to fund. And I'm like, wow, that seems kind of weird that you'd ask your audience for that. And a lot of people were really skeptical about this. It seems almost predatory. It's like, you're professionals. You should be able to get this money from somewhere else instead of the audience. And it's like, guys, this is kind of the only way to fund it now.
Right.
I
Kind
can't
of like,
tell
hey,
you.
the consumer, you guys got to pay for what you want.
I can't tell you the number of hours that Nick and Jess have probably poured into creating some amazing pilot projects and amazing products. There's probably, if the dollar figure appeared on the screen, we probably all fall out of our chairs, right? It's so time consuming and so expensive. And I mean, and Brainy did as well, right? We produced our first 22-minute short out of our hip pocket, right? And that short, that episode rather, it's not a short, it's 22 minutes. That costs more than probably many of your houses, right? Because it's 3D animation, right? So it ain't cheap, right? It ain't cheap to go pitch an idea anymore. You can't just walk in with hey, I got a napkin and an idea, right? I got this sketch of this little guy. Look
If
here.
only.
Those Pixar days, the beginnings of Pixar, those days are over. It's really,
Those videos
really
are
tough.
so
But you can do
discouraging
it.
to watch.
But
Because
now,
it's like to I forgot your name. I'm sorry. I think it's Greg. Is it
JT,
Greg? No.
TJ.
The screen name is Lomo Sala.
Oh, that's
Mention.
Jeff.
Jeff. Why did I say Greg? I'm sorry.
He looks like a Greg.
But I was I was reading the origins of Star Wars and like how that project got started, and apparently back then like the whole cast and crew thought the movie would be a flop, so everyone was like putting in minimal effort. The studio had no faith. They were like, "Hey, just take merchandising rights." So George Lucas is making merchandise. He has like 100% royalties. It changed the game forever. Just that
Yeah.
one movie. But you hear these success stories of like Toy Story and like how they at the inception of the project and like how they this like small studio at the time like stood up to the giants that were like Disney and those other guys. But the sad thing is like we are treading like new ground. We can't look back and do things the way that those other guys are successful, which sucks.
Well, and
I
what
wish there was a beaten path, but we're the
there is.
trailblazers apparently.
There
Yeah.
there is a beaten path, and it's the hardest
Oh.
path you can go, and it's take a
Okay.
huge risk and pour everything you have into story, right? That's that's what's in common of all those success stories you mentioned, Jamal, is those guys and gals, whoever they were, they took a huge risk that no one with, on a spreadsheet or on a tap sheet would go, this I'm in, right? That I'm going to make my money back, right? They took a huge risk that made no sense, and they poured everything they had into story, not special effects,
Yeah.
right? Not costumes, any of that stuff, because they knew
Not
if the
marketing.
story worked, everything else would work, right? So yeah,
I wanted to actually use that to bring us to the sort of article that was mentioned, the allegory versus, like, do we know what an allegory is really? kind of thing. Like I didn't actually finish the article because I was busy wrangling kids while I was reading it. But the idea of good storytelling, I mean, that's all well and good to say, like, oh, It's a Wonderful Life is a great story. Chronicles of Narnia is a great story. There's Lord of the Rings is a great story or something. It's like, we should use like that. I'm like, well, there's a lot of other things that went into making that. Like, what genre even is? Oh, it's fantasy. So, well, not everything. Fantasy's got tropes, and if those tropes are very front and center in everything, it's going to feel the same.
Right.
So you have to know how to do something interesting with that.
Sorry.
Like, where's the audience? Are they bored with fantasy right now? I'm a fan of like James Cameron and the Terminator movies and stuff. So tech noir is kind of a big one for me. I'm like, I don't know where that is right now. I mean, Ridley Scott's still trying to make movies, and I don't know that they're doing so well. But there's like, how do you make good Christian stories with what we have now? Because AI is now like changing everything. Hollywood is going to be changed forever because of this. It is going to make a lot of things different. It's not going to replace everybody's job, but it is going to make things very different. People can augment their stories and have people checking their work via ChatGPT. You can have people generating hundreds of concept art pieces with Midjourney. You can do a lot of this rather quickly with stuff like AI now. In fact, a single person could almost be a studio with an army of robots. So there's an interesting new paradigm where independent production is possible on a much more professional level than it used to be.
Right.
But now, when that becomes ubiquitous, now it's everywhere. What's going to be the new "I would pay for this" standard? It's like, I don't know. It's going to be higher than it used to be. So it's like, you can't just do it all on your own by hand, probably, or can you? I don't know. There's maybe a way to do that, but and how do you write good stories?
I hate to tell you.
Yeah. How do you write good parables that are Christian? Because I've had lots of thought about that, but just from reading the article, it's like, how do you write good poetry? Do we even know that? It's like, how do you make a profound thought, like a profound short film? I think the Coen brothers are really amazing at this. Whether it's the Ballad of Buster Scruggs or some other, like, they're able to make things that are profound and, oh, they're symbols and metaphors. You kind of realize that later. But at first, it was just a really interesting little short piece with a character.
I mean, you mentioned the Coen brothers. I think The Matrix, with a couple of tweaks, could be an amazing Christian film. Right?
Yeah.
You have all the major tropes, right? You have death to life, right? You have a savior. He has to sacrifice himself to save the world, right? I mean, all the major tropes are there, right? And it's about how you spin those tropes. Can you throw them into, uber high tech cyberpunk universe? Yeah, absolutely you can, because the tropes, the themes and the tropes are usually universal, right? And it's just about craftily creating that story, which at this point, Jeff can tell us how long it's going to be before this happens, because he's our big brain AI guy. But the real trick is, for now, humans are the only one that have the ability to create those amazing stories, right? And those amazing new visions. I don't know how long it will be till AI is spitting that stuff out. Jeff, can you enlighten us? You're muted.
It'll probably be a lot quicker than we think. Honestly, everything is progressing so fast. The AI engines are producing video that's just absolutely indistinguishable from high budget feature film scenes.
What about creating amazing stories, though?
Well, I've been using Grok to help me write something that I've wanted to write for a long time, and it's like a neat partnership, actually, because I'll come up with some ideas and feed it to Grok, and it'll tell me if it likes them or it doesn't like them, if they're dumb or they're great or they're interesting, and then I can ask him, her, it for suggestions as to what could happen, and what are some tropes I can break. And yeah, that's where it is for me right now. But pretty soon it'll be writing the stories by itself, I'm sure.
Wow.
I saw something interesting. Sorry, you can go ahead. I'll say it afterwards. I saw something interesting a while back. Post somebody discussing how our artists kind of going to survive in the era of AI art, and their argument was that the audiences are still going to gravitate towards human artists, human writers, and stuff because they want a connection kind of with the creator, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the way that artists can survive making their own art instead of just AI art will be because the artists who get ahead will be the ones who are kind of connecting with their audience, who are having that human element and having that sort of personality and stuff. And it kind of made me think about how I've heard a lot of advice for the writing industry, how it's much easier to get published if you can already establish that you have an audience of people who are interested in your work. If you have like a heavy online presence and say, hey, here's my Instagram and all the people I follow and talk and interact with. Because I think people do want more than you get from just AI spitting something out. I've heard somebody say, why would I be bothered to watch something you couldn't be bothered to make? And I'll be honest, I do have my own opinions on AI writing and its the actual quality level those machines are spitting out, but won't go dunking too much on that.
Yep, I agree. I think I think exploring the whole realm of AI is a whole different collab lab. Honestly, I think we could spend a lot of time on that. But go ahead, Steve and Tyler. Go ahead.
My wife had an answer to you, Nick. She's sitting here with me, and she said while I was muted, but she was listening to what you were asking. Is like, what is the element or the quality, or like what is that thing that I guess the magic sauce that's going to cause a project to stand out? And her answer to that is, when you have fun in the creation process, is that you can really, really tell that. And I didn't answer earlier what my favorite anime was, but currently my favorite anime, for better or for worse, is One Piece. It's got a lot of wrong stuff in it, but one thing you could absolutely tell is that the writer is having so much fun writing exactly what it is he wants to write. And I think that that's what people buy into. Is you look at the content creators, not even the people that aren't necessarily like creating a big brand IP, but the content creators that are online that are regularly putting out stuff that people engage with and people really like get invested in. They're going on a ride. They're experiencing something, and then the invitation to the audience is, come experience this with me. I want you to have fun. I'm having fun. Why don't you come have fun? And when people are feeling that, I think that, especially in the realms of animation, because I know it trends towards that more child audience or youth audience, but that's kind of, I think, what a lot of people are looking for. Even adults. I think it's kind of it's a little pretentious to say that adults aren't looking for an escape. Tolkien said escapism was the point.
Right.
That if you found your way out of a prison, then you should have the obligation or feel the obligation to lead as many people out of the prison as well as you can. And that is essentially what storytelling is doing. It's saying, hey, we're all in this human condition. We're all facing these similar situations or problems just in different ways. Let me present to you what I've found that will work. And that's how you present the message, I think, in a nutshell. That's kind of how you wrap it in there without it being so much icing without cake. Is you give them, this is the solution. Like this is it. And sometimes it doesn't have a happy ending. Like the Lord of the Rings has like a terribly sad ending. I remember when I first finished reading the whole Lord of the Rings, I sat there and I cried because the ending is so melancholy. It's like, what did they do this for? Like the Shire was destroyed. Frodo had to leave. Everything was ruined
I
at
watched
the
it
end.
for the first time last year. I did watch it growing
I
up.
can't remember the ending.
Wait, that's the end?
Yeah,
I should rewatch it.
and it's almost dreadful. But that's kind of the Christian story, is that the world is kind of dreadful. the hope is not in the world that is, but in the world that is to come.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the story that Tolkien communicated. And that's Frodo's end. And so that's
I think
there. I'm sorry. I went on a
no,
tirade.
I think what you're talking about, Steve and Tyler, is that thing that people are feeling in these various platforms or various content where they're getting on board and they're getting excited is authenticity, right? And that's one thing we don't need to discount, right? It's going to be a while, I would imagine. Jeff will probably correct me in about 4.7 seconds, but I think it's going to be a while before AI can produce anything that really feels authentic. Even the really high-end, really nice video stuff that is putting out right now, it still feels like there's not a lot of soul in it. And I think for us,
That's what
as
Hollywood feels
creatives-
like now, actually.
what now? Sorry.
Yeah, for real.
That's actually what Hollywood feels like now.
Yeah.
Which is why AI has a shot at replacing what it's doing now, is because a lot of what they make now feels pretty much just like that.
Right, but we know.
Regurgitation.
If we replace the Hallmark
know-
writers, no one would notice.
In
Maybe
a weird
that's
kind of way, though, that's kind of what AI is designed to do. AI, like, there's a really big misconception out there that AI just makes up stuff. It doesn't. What it does is it basically autofills what you think should happen next. If it's making a picture, it autofills what the next pixel should be based on
it's
a
autocorrect
library of
on steroids.
resources. And so if it's sampling a whole bunch of soulless stuff out of Hollywood, it's no wonder that it's going to give a whole bunch of soulless stuff. And then it gets even worse when it starts sampling itself, and it becomes very intellectually inbred, so to speak. And then there's just like, this is flawed. But that's not to say that it couldn't inherently start picking up on that authenticity if we were to see it come back to the market. And I think that that's what the ability of AI as a tool enables people to do, is it democratizes creativity in such a way that you can see people, like small crews, put out those grassroots projects that are going to get the Kickstarter investments, that are going to get that kind of initial push that they need to get it in front of a backer or a funder to actually make the big projects happen.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not seeing that right now in the industry. The people who are investing are very savvy, right? And like folks like Brainy, folks like House of Ducci, we try really, really hard to make some really amazing stuff that blow people's socks off. And they can tell something that's fake and cheap and that's been just kind of not a lot of work has gone into it, and they're not willing to invest in stuff like that.
Sure.
They can see and feel that hard work in the stuff that you're pitching. And if you just whip together something with AI, I don't think it would pass muster.
Yeah, I think you kind of. Sorry.
Go ahead, Kat.
So I feel like you're kind of almost bending the definition of authentic by applying it to AI, because I think it's inherently not designed to be authentic. It's designed to be
actually what I was
the
actually trying to
average
say.
sum of everything that's created, and people can
I was trying
tell
to say
not just because of the
so.
style.
Yeah, I was trying to say we have a
Good
leg.
question.
We have a leg up on AI because what we produce is authentic, right? And the stuff that AI produces, for a while, at least, again, Jeff will correct me in 4.8
I don't
seconds.
I think no matter how good it gets, no matter how beautiful it looks, no matter how pretty of a design it looks, it will still just be the average sum of the best on the market instead of a particular unique thing. And it will.
Yeah, could be. And I'll say
You
this.
gotta
and I'll say
wonder
this.
if you can.
Go ahead.
If you can make something with AI, why do you need investors? Why do you need anybody to help you fund the project? Just do it. Just finish the rest of it. AI can just make it, right?
Right now,
money,
you
I
can't make
guess.
enough with AI, right? You can't make enough with AI. But
But
I'll say
I
this.
will.
I'll be right back, guys.
Oh, go ahead. You first.
I'll just say this, and you'll hear me say this again when we do our talk on AI, because this is really and truly where I feel the line is, and the huge advantage that we as Christian creatives have over AI, and will always have over AI, no matter how good it gets. And that's, we have the Holy Spirit, right? We have literally the Spirit of God inside of us, the same Spirit that inspired the dudes and dudettes that wrote the Holy Bible. We got that. AI will never have that. And so we can always be inspired directly from God and make something killer and amazing. But again, it's got to be what he wants, not what we want, right? He's not going to inspire you to make the zombie movie that detracts from him and puts him as the villain. He's not going to be all about that. So I think Christians have something that the secular world will never have, and that's a hope that they'll never be replaced by AI because they don't have the Holy Spirit.
And we have someone who created the whole world on our side.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's the most creativity anyone more.
Ultimate cosmic power.
Brandon, I love that you brought up earlier that the Matrix is essentially a Christian story.
Yeah.
Because of the themes presented, and that's exactly what I brought the same thing up in the last all hands on. Most of you guys weren't here, but I think that sorry, the Bible inherently has the best story, and like we can't, as humans, we can't help but to borrow from that. Like some of my favorite stories ever. Well, after I got saved, like like really saved, and started to take a closer look at these things, that same like Christ like journey is shown through like so many heroes. It's in Harry Potter,
Oh, yeah.
sadly. It's in the Matrix. Is like that same. I think because of how powerful the Bible is, the world can't help but take from it. Even things that are like vehemently on the other side of Christ's message, it can't help but take things from the Bible and invert it. The enemy's not original. He can just steal and distort stuff.
The
But
truth is what works. It's same thing in comedy. Either you're funny or you're not. And it's
right.
because of the truth. Like if you point out something that's
Right.
true and everybody recognizes it, even if they weren't thinking of it before, oh, that's funny. It's the connection to the
Yeah.
truth, to reality that actually makes it funny. And the same thing
Right.
with authenticity that Kat's talking about. Like I've seen people who have no artistic ability whatsoever, no writing ability whatsoever, no like any of the traditional like storytelling like skills and talents. And yet they've made things like interactive experiences, little puzzles you can unlock. Like whether it's the creepy pastas that exist on forums or whether it's like these little website games where it's like, oh, if you find this little clue, it'll lead you to another website and it'll actually lead you to a trail of breadcrumbs that leads to some kind of answer, whether it's just pattern recognition. But what it is you can tell a person made that. And that is a connection, even though it wasn't really all that artistic. It was just something that a person did that has connections throughout. And you can tell who that person was. This has been an entertaining thing all the way back into the past, whether it's people writing letters to each other or anything else. So we've got ways of connecting to an audience without having to pander or fake it or just try to tell them what we think they want. It's more we tell them what we think is true and they're like, oh, a real person was telling me that, like honestly. And that actually is something that makes me respect it, or at least try to consider maybe there's something there. Instead of it being like an ad. It's like, how dare you interrupt my time to try to distract me with your nonsense, trying to get money out of me. I hate this. I hate this distraction. Go away from me, Satan. That's how I react to radio commercials and all that stuff. It feels fake. It's just trying to get money out of me. Anybody who uses AI in an ad, I hate it. Those fake, obvious mouth lip syncs and fake Elon Musk or Joe Rogan or something. It's like, I hate those things. You make a product with that, never going to touch that in a million years because it is the fakest thing I've ever seen. I won't touch that. And we, as Christians, have been making Bible stories that feel like that for decades, and it is embarrassing. We need to do so much better than that, and we so can.
I want to go back to Jamal. He said he got really saved. I'm like, what's that all about? I want to get really saved. I just got saved. I didn't get really saved. Can I get
really?
That like the next level? Well, Jesus plus? What's that all about?
Super duper saved.
I know what you mean, but I feel like for the first part of my like up until I was like 26, I had a really flawed view of what Christianity was. I thought I had it figured out. I thought because I was raised in a Christian home and I went to church and all that, and I kind of analyzed it the way that it was laid out to me, and I thought, okay, well, you know, God saves us, and then we're on this earth for about 80 years, and we got to be on our best behavior. At the end, He's gonna grade our test, right? He'll tell us if we passed or we failed. So if we fail, we go to hell, and if we pass, we go to heaven. But then the caveat is like, okay, we learned that you can't ever, like, you can't really be good enough for God. You'll always fall short because He's perfect. But at the same time, if you fall short, He'll forgive you forever and ever. So it kind of put this like nihilistic twist in what I believed. I kind of felt like we were doing like a pointless game here, and I was like, well, if that's the rules, we're just gonna do whatever, right? I'll just do what I want to do, because you can't trying your best isn't gonna get you in, and no matter how hard you failed, God got you. So
Right.
I didn't really understand what I was here for, and
Yeah. Works
it put me in a really
workspace.
bad place. But it it put me in the perfect position for God to really show me His purposes in my life and show me um, that there is a a greater narrative to what his plan is other than the one that I kind of pieced together in my mind.
It sounds to
Um,
me like you went from being a cultural Christian to a born again believer.
Yeah, he was
yeah,
living under a workspace gospel until he got the story. He got the whole story of the true gospel. Good tie in there,
I
Jermaine. You planned that, didn't you?
one one aspect, and this is why I think someone said it earlier, but yes, we have the Holy Spirit, and that's why we are in. God is the best storyteller ever.
Amen.
Similarly to how I was telling my neighbor this actually, but most of us know Star Wars. I'm a big fan of Star Wars, myself. But the story starts at episode 4. Wait, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, Brandon's just making faces. Okay, I
I
didn't. I
was
thought,
like,
yeah,
what's Star Wars? What's that? I'm joking.
the story starts at episode 4, right, and then we get 5 and 6. But at the beginning of Star Wars, we don't really understand what happened before until like episode 1, 2, and 3 are revealed, and to some extent, well, or I should say, you know, what most people don't realize is like the Bible starts at Genesis, but that's like the beginning of our story here on Earth. But even at that point, we don't really understand like, okay, why is Satan or why is Satan a serpent here? Why is the snake talking? Why is he like why is he rebelling against God? There's a whole other set of chapters that happened before Genesis that fleshes out the story that we get to find out later. And like the Bible's thousands of years old, but still implemented this like really amazing storytelling where like there's there's hints of like there's a whole I don't want to go on too much for this, but so many of like the media that I consume, the video games that I played, they the villains and the heroes they act out these same archetypes.
Sure.
I think I went on a bit of a tangent here, but inherently, even before that, even before I wanted to live for God, I was always an artist. I always loved video games, storytelling in general. I'd tell all my friends and my siblings about this like cool new game I played and the story that was in it. And and part of me being saved was God showing me His desire for the stories that wanted to be told, and some of the stories that I already kind of had brewing in my heart, God started to like reveal more of those. Like kind of imagine like a glass of water that got like blue. This is the vision that I'm getting, like a glass of water with like a blue drop of food coloring, right? Like some dye, and it just changes the whole thing.
Mhm.
Um, that was me on my path before God kind of like dropped His Holy Spirit food coloring in my cup. Oh yes, Brandon, that's the
I love
that
that.
was the difference between being saved and like really saved for me.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. Level up.
I know you
Super,
guys
super
didn't ask
safe.
for the whole
You
thing,
said
but
DJ?
Thank you so much. Like
Yeah, I
he's
mean,
actually caring.
it's pretty cool because not only is God the greatest storyteller, he literally created all the different types of stories that you can tell.
Yeah.
So
For sure.
it's like you're never
I
gonna one
really
up to
think
this.
that I think that any story that you can tell has been told in the Bible first at some point.
Yeah.
If I can get one more detraction, one one of my favorite my last one, okay. One of my favorite um I want to say one of my favorite like tropes to see in just like film, video game, media in general is the the type of contrasting brothers, like contrasting characters. So we see this. I can give you a couple examples. They're typically colorized like red and blue, and they're kind of like opposites in every way. So we can see that with like Sonic and Knuckles. We can see like in Street Fighter, there's Ryu and Ken. With Ninja Turtles, there's Leonardo, there's Raphael. There's always these like red and blue coated like twins in a way that are like kind of contrasting personalities that are always butting heads. I can go on and on. It's in anime. It's like Goku is in orange, Vegeta's in blue, Naruto is in orange, Sasuke's in blue. Like I can do that for like minutes, but I learned that that trope, even that, shows up in the Bible first. So I'm reading Genesis. I think Brandon can see where I'm going with this. And Sarah is having twins. Is it Sarah, right? Sarah.
Yeah.
Yes, Sarah, I believe. Sarah's having
Rebecca, I
twins.
think.
Rebecca.
Isaac's wife.
Someone.
Yeah.
One generation down.
Well, first
No, no,
Sarah,
no.
he had
Yeah, it's
issues
Sarah, right?
with Isaac. Right, they weren't twins, but they were close in age.
Oh, sorry.
I'm thinking of Jacob and Esau. Who was
Rebecca.
Sarah?
That's Rebecca.
Rebecca. Sorry. Jacob and Esau, they're twins, and they're already fighting in the womb, right? Um, so they're born and they grew up, and the Bible makes sure to show you that they're complete opposites. So Esau is a huntsman, and Jacob is like a dweller in tents. So he's basically a bookworm, right? But they also make the point to say that Esau has red hair, right? Like that is such a detail that it doesn't, if you don't know what you're looking for, it almost like it has no significance. But like that red character in like all media is always like the rash, outgoing, like kind of like brazen one, and the one that's like kind of blue coated is more like introspective, um, analytical. And I was just so amazed because I had already been like piecing together this kind of story or like analyzing that kind of character across like all the stuff that I've seen. But I was born in what 1992. I was just amazed to see that the Bible had already done that thousands of years prior. And
So
like
cool.
yeah, and like that's just like one thing. Like I've seen thousands of like really cool like the way that villains and or antagonists are designed, how heroes are written, and like every time I go back to the Bible, I'm like, oh, this was done here first, you know.
It's I
God is
saw
consistently proving that he's the
I
best
saw a movie of
storyteller.
Jacob and Esau a couple months ago, or where actually the actor Boromir from Lord of the Rings played Esau, and it was
Really?
like the best Esau playing I've ever seen.
Did he die in the end?
I mean, I'm sorry, no, keep going.
No, did he die in the end?
Esau. No, he didn't. Oh, I see. I get it. He died. Yeah, I guess
There's
that's what he did die in.
there is
Sean
another
Bean
one
podcast is the
that
bad
and
guy.
I promise I'll stop with this one. But I was talking about it in the last um all hands on. But there's one particular storytelling trope that I really do like, and they storytelling sites categorize it as the failed predecessor. Like there's always that. Well, a lot of times the point that the hero comes against, like maybe the big bad guy that's been behind everything so far, and we learn that like the bad guy had the hero's position before but fell. Right, so probably one of the most famous one is Darth Vader. He was like the chosen one, but he chose the dark side, right? And and I won't tell you so like how many other times I've seen that across like different shows, but it's always a really powerful moment when you like confront the person that like had your job and had your experience before. But there's two places I see that show up in the Bible. The easiest example to see is probably with David and Saul, King King David and Saul before him. So Saul is obviously the failed predecessor. If you look at his story, he starts off really strong. He's not always a failure. He starts off really good, prophesying, he's doing all these cool things for the kingdom, but slowly but surely he's getting away from God until he gets fired, right? And David has to take that place, and Saul's trying to kill him for a long time. But even before that, we get a glimpse of what that is with Adam and the serpent, who's Satan, right? So we don't get a picture of this at Genesis, but we know as Christians, because we know the Bible, that Satan had his high position in heaven, and then he wanted to be equal to God, and God cast him out and all that. But Satan had a position where, certain legend has it that his job was to orchestrate worship in heaven, right? So he's in a fallen state. He gets cast out, and who does God create? Us. He creates us, and we are part of our purpose is to worship Him in our lives. And Satan hates that for some reason. You ever wonder, like, why doesn't Satan just float off in space? Why is he here antagonizing us? It's because we took his place, and that's part of that, like, same. It's the archetypical character of the failed predecessor. You hate the person that's taking your place, even if they have nothing to do with you. It's like you're just there because you can't stand it that you were fired, right? But um, but anyway, it's just another point that God has showed me, that He has told all these cool stories first.
Yep,
It gets me
absolutely.
to read my Bible more.
That's good.
And that was your
probably
Bible ad
doesn't-
for the day.
Satan probably doesn't like the fact that we're going to judge him one day and all the other angels. That's probably a
Mm.
probably a little nit in his
Yeah.
craw. What's up, Corey? You got to
Could
say
we
something?
make a allegory out of? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just agreeing.
Over to you, Nick.
I was like, could we actually make an allegory out of the red versus blue?
It already exists, so
Yeah. It's like, how do we make fun stories today? Like, one thing we've sort of used is just trying to change the perspective of the protagonist. As in, make the protagonist someone else who was not the main character of the same story. So that's like one. We've seen this in the Animatrix and other things where you pick a character who's not the main character. We actually tried to do this at Jesus Film, where we would take characters who were around Jesus in the Gospels, and we would try to tell the story of the Gospel, but from their point of view. So we had one from the thief who was redeemed at the end. One of the two thieves. And that's actually the anime Jesus film that got produced. That one actually got produced and finished. And they go into the thief's backstory. They go into how he ended up there. When he saw Jesus, what it looked like. He saw him getting whipped before they ended up walking with the beams and then getting crucified later.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome. These
I completely forgot
other
about the
characters.
elephants.
Yeah. We've got some other ones as well where like Peter or Mary, Mary Magdalene or Mary, Mother of Jesus. You could pick different characters to tell the same story. Now, that's not an allegory, but those are other ways of telling interesting versions of the same story, because we've got the same story again. It's the gospel or the Old Testament. You could try just shifting the main character's perspective. What's like another one that might be interesting to try with some of the stuff we have now for telling good stories? What would be a good way to tell an allegory that maybe we haven't tried yet? I'm curious about that, because I'm sort of short on techniques. Like when they talk about, oh, here's what an allegory is, I'm like, oh, I kind of know what an allegory is, but I don't know what's new. Like, how do you make a new one? They're so simple, it's kind of hard to, like, how do you come up with another base element like water? Like, I don't know. Water is water. It's the only one we got. So I don't know.
I think it's I think the best way is to. It's the difficult thing when you're trying to create something fresh and new is to reinvent the wheel. But um, I think like what I stated earlier, we have a really good wheel already, but we have what's been done has been kind of like what's the word? Like you made a really good point when you said that a lot of our Bible lessons have been like AI commercials. But I think it's
I feel
the
like it.
answer might be to study, or at least this is how I approach it. I look at the way that these archetypes have been done really well, and like I kind of study like what's cool about this moment, right? What do I enjoy seeing happen with this character? And once I can kind of get that point boiled down, I just like change the homework a little bit. Make the character my own, maybe change the situation, but have like, the same kind of thing happening. If it's like a sacrifice, or if it's like a person having to confront their fears, or that kind of thing. I think once you get the element of what's happening, changing the setting and like or the characters that it happens to or with, um, you can do that to kind of create a fresh spin on like what is essentially like a human emotion, like a human experience. I don't think humans really experience like new struggles on Earth. Even though our technology changes, it's still our
All the same.
struggles are kind of the same. Like even though we have like technology, or we're more connected, the fact that human beings still get lonely is still like a thing that human beings have been lonely for like thousands of years. Um,
Nothing new under the sun, as Solomon said.
That's right.
right.
Absolutely. I was about to
We
say,
still want to like
That may be
prove
true, but it's
ourselves.
still the job of storytellers. Hollywood's been making bank on it for years. Video games still do it. We
well,
still tell the same hero with a thousand faces story,
I've got a
yet it's
suggestion.
still entertaining. Yeah. Oh,
So I can tell you what I do, right? I pray for inspiration, right? And then I wait for God to show up. I've got a great example, right? This book right here, right? H2O, co-wrote it with a guy several years ago. It's probably been 15 years ago. When I'm trying to come up with a story myself, I like take different components of a story that I like, write a character moment or a character arc or an archetype, and I throw it in the stew pot of my brain, let it simmer back there. This book literally came to me when I splashed my face with water. And the whole story is about water. It's ironic that you mentioned water in your question, because the water that's on this planet is the same water that's always been here, right? It's always recycled through the water table. So when I splashed my face with water, God showed me the whole outline for this book. And essentially it's about what would happen if you could see through the eyes of water, right? You could see something that water saw at some point in the past, right? So what if you were a molecule of water that was in the Red Sea when it was split? What if you were a molecule of water that became the first rainbow? What if you were a molecule of water that was in the rock when Moses split it open, right? And so this story is about a woman who has everything the world thinks she needs to be happy. She's rich. She has the job of her dreams. She's dating her boss, right? She has her motorcycle, which she loves to ride in the rain, but she doesn't have God. And God decides to get her attention. Every time she touches water, he sends a vision. And this vision is through the eyes of water. And some of these visions are gory, right? Imagine seeing dead bodies, floating in the Red Sea, right? When all the Egyptians are getting torn apart by the surge. Some of them are beautiful, the rainbow. Some of them are mysterious, can't tell what they are, right? But he does this in order to drive her to the point where she stops touching water and her body begins to break down, right? She stops drinking water. She stops bathing. All these bad things happen to you when you separate yourself from water. And it gets to the point where she's so desperate that she runs back to Jesus, right? She begins to realize what's going on. So there's this amazing salvation moment in the end of the book. But I wrote the book to be like a speculative novel, right? Like a vision novel, right? So because the audience was women who are all about this vision space, right? That are probably pagans, or they're lost, and they want to understand visions. And we've had people, hundreds of women have read this book, and they've left reviews, and they've said, I wanted to hate this book, but it was so beautifully written that I couldn't put it down, right? Or this book was amazing. I hate that Jesus is in the book at the end, but I still love this character, right? Or whatever. So sometimes it's about waiting for the God story. The Kendrick brothers will often say, we have lots of good ideas, but we wait on the God idea. And those dudes do. They will pray for 3 or 4 years on about the next film before they start making it. So God will give you, if it's within his will, he will give you the interpretation of the archetypes. He will give you the new idea, the new wrinkle on the stories or the character arcs. When we try to force it, though, I think what happens is we kind of wind up committing the same sins that all the people we've been trashing for the last 2 hours, the same sins that they're doing, right? We're just trying to fit something into a mold to get it out the door, to get it to those people. So I would encourage you to spend time in prayer and seek his face and his will. So not the fast solution. That's definitely the best solution.
To go off what Brandon said. Oh, sorry. I think you can go ahead.
I was saying, always a good decision. You can
Oh,
accumulate so many techniques, but you never know when to use it. You never know which one is right. I'm 100 paths. Like I have 100 ideas at once. I don't know which one to do.
I'm the same way, and that's why I've learned to wait for a road sign.
I was reading this book that gave context to the Bible, and it was talking about it's a pretty academic book, but one chapter was refuting a lot, and in a lot of scholarly places they try to diminish the Bible by saying like, okay, like the flood story is not original and like other cultures did it first. And this particular part of the Bible was explaining why certain authors use vernacular that might have been common at the time, like in their space. And I'll tell you what this has to do with what Brennan said in a second. But in particular, to like the like things like Tiamat, I think is mentioned, and like Leviathan. These are like entities that Babylonians had like knew of, like the Mesopotamian people had like knew of and praised. And at the time that I'm sorry, not Genesis, Job was written, the Jewish people were captive in Babylon. So while they were writing this story, Holy Spirit inspired, they're making it known that like their God, the God of the Bible, is greater than the Babylonian God or the other gods in Mesopotamia. And the whole point of that chapter, among other points, was that yes, the Holy Spirit inspires us to write things in the Bible, but it's not like they went into a trance and like God took control of their hand and like wrote the Bible. Like God is using these people and their experiences to fulfill His purpose at the time. You know,
Yeah.
and I think that part of this might help you, Nick, but when you do get that God idea, He's still using you and your experiences to what's the word I'm looking for, to
It's
control that idea with, but
it's
to
more
put
than that. It's more than that, right? The idea he gives to Nick wouldn't work for anybody else, right?
sure.
God
That's
knows us
what I want
better.
to say.
God knows us better than we know ourselves. He literally made us, right? He knows you better than anyone, even your best friend, your mom, your dad, all put together. So he knows the ins and outs of Nick Aducci, right? He knows his pain points. He knows his passions. He knows his failings. He knows all of his experiences and everything that happens in Nick's life and everything that will happen. He knows exactly the moment when to tip the right domino to inspire Nick to go do something that if Nick is faithful in the execution of that, it will bring glory to God, because God's all about his own glory. And so it only could be Nick, right? This only could have been me and my writing partner. It could have only been us at that time in my life, right? I couldn't write this book now. I couldn't. It's gone. It's not in my head anymore, right? So that's what we have to get our heads around, is that God's a major chess player, right? I mean, he's like, the Star Trek 4D chess, but he's like 100D, right? And he's gonna, and so that's why we have to work really hard at being obedient and being supple instruments that he can use, and giving ourselves daily as a living sacrifice, right? That's kind of one of the things that means to me, is that every day I lay my life down and I say, it ain't about what I want today, it's what you want. And so the more we do that, the more he's able to utilize us. And so it could only be Nick at that point in time, right? No one else in the world that has ever existed could do it. It's just Nick at that moment. And if he's not obedient, he may lose that opportunity, right? And that may be a lost blessing. God's got a backup plan. He always has multiple backup plans, right? So about being obedient.
Yeah, I've felt that. Opportunities. I like to watch them as they pass by. Nice.
All right, well, I think we're winding down. People are dropping like flies. So we got about probably 10 minutes and we'll call it 2. Does that sound good, Jess? Or are you ready to wrap it up now?
Either way. If there's more to talk about, keep talking. Okay. If not, we can wrap it up.
Look, Nick looks like he's ready for bed. He's been up doing karate all day.
I'm gonna karate jitsu some kids into a tub, but we can keep talking while I'm doing it. I'm just gonna mute myself while I do.
Somebody else has something else that's just pressing. The Lord wants him to say. Bueller.
What do you think?
Yeah, what do you
This one's making video games right now.
Sweet. Awesome. Tell him I got a job for him as soon as he gets ready for it.
Right, so this was awesome. This was super inspiring. This was a great chat.
Yes, thank you all for being here. Thank you for those of you that hung to the end. Thank you for hanging to the end, your troopers. Thank you to Jess for recording all this and acting as our program manager, as she always does. And we'll see you guys for the next Collab Lab in 1 month. So the first Thursday of every month. We'll do it, Lord willing. And in 2 weeks, is that right? Or 3 weeks, we'll have our all hands meeting for the Brainy Pixelers out there. So, and I'll see Jess and Nick next week in the real world, IRL, at the Christian World.
Crazy.
Like the first.
Where is that? The Christian, what is it?
It's in Albany, Georgia, the Christian Worldview Film Festival, CWVFF.com, I think. If you haven't been
able to make it this year, but maybe
if you haven't been, it's worth it. Go for sure. It's amazing. So we drove through Memphis on our way to Dallas, but it was Sunday, and you guys were probably at church when we went through. And I wanted to come back through Memphis and see you guys on Friday when we came home. But we Michael was driving. He took a different turn, and we came home 20. So we came home along the
Michael.
Shame on you.
I know. I was
Shame on
frustrated.
You missed out on some good barbecue.
Just bring it. Bring it to Christian Worldview.
Okay.
Or we'll all go get some barbecue at Christian Worldview. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Are the kids coming, or just you two?
No, it's just us.
Oh wow. Well, y'all might not have time to go out to barbecue. Y'all might have your own agenda.
Oh, you. Oh, my goodness.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks everybody for showing up. We'll see you all next time. Y'all be blessed.
See y'all.